I'm drawn to very basic subjects: religion, sex, race, poverty. And even though I don't call myself a political artist, I am a human being who has eyes and ears, and I see what I see around me, and I have my own opinions. And sometimes, though I may not express those opinions, but I do the work in such a way that it's open to interpretation. I've developed a language, and I think it's pretty bold, direct, simple, easy to understand. You don't need to know much about art to understand what I'm showing you. An artist needs to be able to step outside of what is considered normal, traditional. That's what makes you an artist, because if you were happy with the status quo, you wouldn't want to change it. And so I think it's that basic unhappiness, that longing to find something that's missing, that makes some artists better. My early works after art school, when I was about 18, were black and white pictures. I took black and white pictures. And then after a couple of years, I tried color one day, and then I never went back to black and white. I sort of discovered a whole new world, and it seemed like a real world. Most of my work is in color, but then when I started the Residence of New York, the first images that I did are in black and white. And with the Residence of New York, I was actually joined to the pictures of the homeless and of the poor in the WPA era in the 30s, during the Depression, when the government hired great artists and photographers to document what they saw around them. And so some of the most incredible images of that era came from these photographers, who are today icons, and because of the work they did. So I wanted to show that even now, 50 years later, we still have the same kind of depressed atmosphere on the streets of New York City as we had during the Depression. And some of those black and white images of the homeless that I took were, they look like they could have been done in the 40s, The idea of doing a fake painting came to me. And so I did this image called Milk Blood. It's 2 tanks of liquid buttered together. One is filled with milk, the other blood. You don't see the edges of the tank, you just see the middle, the dividing line. And that milk blood is a reference to Mondrian. And so with milk blood starts the bodily fluids, the immersions, and the idea of doing something that looks like painting and is going against the grain of photography, because photography is concerned with subjects, with spatial relationships, with perspective. And here, it's nothing but color. After Milk Blood, I did Milk. It's a monochrome, a photographic monochrome of milk. I think Milk and the second one, Blood, Piss, I think those were the first monochromes in photography. At least I like to believe it. Monochromes are a dime a dozen in painting, but in photography, it's not a usual thing. Again, it's about abstraction. It's about abstract painting, action painting, geometric painting. And so Piss Christ became the first immersion, where I immersed an object into one of the tanks. But as far as whether my work is sacred or profane, I feel you can't have one without the other. You can't have good without evil, because you need to know the difference. Otherwise, everything would be the same. So we need evil to know what good is. We need the profane to know what the sacred is. And as far as I'm concerned, sometimes it's complicated. It's not so easy to read between the lines, Certainly, but when it comes to my work, I don't think there's anything blasphemous about it. I think it's very sacred, and I think it's a devout work, Christian work. And my goal, my dream, is to meet Pope Francis, to get not only his blessing, but to say, this guy, he's an artist, he's a Christian, and let me do something for the church in the same way that religious artists of the past have done something for the church. I made my America series right after September 11th. And I did it because I felt America had been attacked as the enemy. So I wanted to show who the enemy is. And I started with the obvious symbols of September 11th. The postal worker, the firemen who were digging. They'd been digging down there for weeks by the time I photographed them. They've got a lot of dirt on them. They've got a lot of sadness. I also photographed an FBI agent in a hazmat suit, a soldier, a policewoman. And then I went on to photograph the people who represent America, the people who live in America, you know, the middle class, the working class, the underclass, and finally the celebrities. Well, the America series was published as a book by Taschen, and when I started to realize that pictures would be next to each other, I started to think not in terms of singular portraits, but in terms of double portraits and what would go next to what. And two images that are, you know, pretty much telling the story of America for me are in the very beginning. It's a picture of a man who is a sheik, Indian sheik, but he looks like Taliban because he's got a long beard and a turban. And of course, you know, the Taliban, you know, was a bad guy at that moment, you know. So he represented something. And then facing him is a woman, an airline pilot, blonde, blue-eyed, and she's laughing in his direction. And that starts the book pretty much. And I felt like that was a statement, you know, that we laugh at you, you know. Even after you do this to us, we laugh at you because we're stronger and better than you. But that picture represents a lot because it's laughing in the face of danger. I photograph people both as individuals and as symbols. So a lot of the people that I photographed, I thought, you know, symbolized a certain group of people, whether they were religious, not religious, outsiders. I'm always drawn to the outsider. I remember asking my assistants for a mother and a child on welfare. And then I said, make sure it's not a black mother or a Hispanic mother. And so I found the Ukrainian mother and child on welfare. Because I think sometimes it's important to recognize the stereotypes and then play against them. But I tried not to engage too much in conversation because I want them to be alone for that moment, as alone as they can be with me and others around them. I want them in their own space so that when I take the picture and I show it to you, it's like I'm not even there. I embarked on this investigation of torture. I started by going to London and photographing some museums, torture museums, and one museum in particular, it's called the Heaver Collection, is interesting, and it's very good because it's authentic medieval torture instruments. Most of the torture instruments and devices you see in torture museums all over the world are reproductions, but here, this is the real thing. And so I photographed some of these masks that look quite beautiful, look very much like an element of a carnival to them, but they're made of metal and they're meant to oppress. They're meant. Some of them have things going inside, so they would be very painful to wear these things. And you know, it's not only the pain, but the humiliation, degradation of having to wear this kind of thing. I looked at torture from different perspectives. You have torture as entertainment, you know, as a tourist attraction, spectacle. I also went to concentration camps, and even though I won't say you see torture as spectacle there, you see a lot of tourists. You see there people who are obviously paying homage to the dead, but you also see Chinese, Japanese tourists, you know. I can't say that America is number one when it comes to torture. I don't know. I don't know who's number one. I don't think we are, you know. I know we're not. And so there's a lot of people who've tortured, a lot of governments, a lot of groups, you know, even going back to the Spanish Inquisition, you know. And we go back to The days of slavery, pre-civilization, torture's been around since the caveman, probably. But my torture is not documentation, it's not reportage, it's not real, it's art. These torture instruments, some of them look like works of art, especially the authentic ones, but in my pictures, it's a pretty picture of a nice but strange looking thing. But when you think about what that thing does, for instance, there's a photograph of an instrument called the pear, and even though it's a very nice title, the pear, what it actually does is they would put it in your orifice and open you up. So it's a cute little object. I photographed it beautifully. It has a nice name, but it's a very sinister thing. I learned it's easy to torture people if you have power over them. Of course, I had the power of the artist. I shoot film with flash. I'm not digital. And so, a lot of times they had to hold these difficult positions for more than 5 or 10 minutes, but even after 15 minutes, and these are strong young guys, and they're still being tortured. It was a lot of physical pressure for them. It could be a meditation on evil, it could be a meditation on art, it could be a meditation on a lot of things. Well, I have my own aesthetic values, formal, composition, color, subject, concept, though. The concepts are important. I mean, I wish I could take pretty pictures of children and puppies and kittens and dogs, but nobody wants that from me, They would accept it from Joe Blow, but I'm not Joe Blow. They expect more. They want me to up the ante. They want me to be provocative, controversial, even if I don't feel like it. I know that some of the critics who hate my work the most and say so in print, when they feel I'm being just controversial, provocative for the hell of it, they're the ones who ignore the work when it's not provocative or controversial. And so, I think they expect more from me, but I can only do what I feel is necessary. And so what I do makes sense for me.